Hi, William Henshaw here again, another one of my current events videos on YouTube. And this is a reaction to a very important video I just saw and that you need to see from Clyde Kerr III. Its final words before he commits suicide. He's a law enforcement officer in New Orleans, Louisiana, that, like a lot of them, also had a background in the military. And he talks about a lot of things that I discussed in somewhat more detail and with more basic knowledge, but nevertheless, he gets it. You know exactly what the system is, and this is law enforcement speaking for you people out there. This is your own people saying it, not me. That they don't care about you as law enforcement any more than they do about us. We have a system here that does not care about human life. It does not recognize it. Simple as that. And they put you on the front lines against us on the front lines, and you see what's happened, especially over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. To be sure, most of it has been against black people that have been killed without any reason at all, and most of these cops should have been tried and convicted for murder. And you know how little of that's happening of late, and it continues to be the case. So I mean, this is the problem that we have. And the sooner you law enforcement people understand that you're enforcing laws that are unenforceable. If you were just taught by the governor who has the sworn duty to see the laws are faithfully executed, you wouldn't be out there doing this. And you also wouldn't have any official capacity if you got into it with someone, and there you are without a warrant, without probable cause, and even though you got a badge and a gun and a uniform, you're not acting in any official capacity. That's the simple bottom line here. This is the U.S. Supreme Court saying it, not me. John Badoff versus United States, 177 U.S. 529, I believe is the site there. We have a right to self-defense. And yet there's no way, no known way at this moment in time to exercise it. That's one of the main objectives of the work I've been doing for 5 decades, 15 years all in, is to get the government back that we're supposed to have. It wasn't perfect to start with. No one's saying it is, but it's a hell of a lot better starting place, and we can make changes consistent with the Constitution, not in contravention of it. That's why we're in so much damn trouble today. There's no amendments, very arguably, after the 13th. And there's an interesting story with that amendment, too, that's outside the scope of this video. But understand this. This goes to a very recent event that just happened, I believe, in Miami, Florida, where a couple of FBI agents were killed while attempting to serve a warrant. Now, I don't know any of the facts of the case or how much, the people knew inside the house that was being attacked. But they had a clue what the law really is and what their rights really are. They were acting in self defense, and the FBI agents were not acting in any official capacity. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm not saying that that's what happened there. What I am saying is if I'm on a jury and someone comes in and makes an argument like that, to me, it's an affirmative defense. They're going to have a very willing and listening person on the jury. Not only that, but explain to other members of the jury why it is that we shouldn't convict anybody of anything. I mean, that's how the system is supposed to work. Government of defined and limited powers. Have you seen anything like that recently in the last several decades? I'd love to see it. I mean, they don't even think they have any limits. And all you have a right to do is go push a goddamn voting river once every 4 years. That's consent of the government. And they can do any damn thing they want to. And without any immunity, without any liability, I should say, with immunity, usually qualified, if not total, judicial immunity from lawsuits. But here again, if you know what I've learned over the course of 5 decades, we have ways around this. And we can go after them. And that's one of the things I'm building right now. And what I do is setting up, where we end up filing a lot of pleadings in a trial court, whether it's a traffic court or what have you. And like my Oakland case that I've won, and I've done videos on, it was a felony case, 14 felonies, and they plea bargained out after being contemptuous of us at the beginning. But they finally realized they couldn't go out there and, win the case, but I'm going to take the witness stand and explain to the jury what the hell is going on there. So we do that. We set an unopposed record. In 5 decades, I've not even had most of the documents acknowledged, let alone opposed. And the the DA, has the sworn duty to sustain at least the government's burden of proof on jurisdiction and venue of the court. This goes a lot further than just saying, well, we have this law, we have that law, there's an action here, an action there, it means this, means that, and without regard to the definitions of the words in the statutes either. And you'll find out that most of them, for example, 14600 in California, no person shall drive on a highway unless he holds a valid license. Person doesn't mean what you think. It means a corporation. And you probably aren't there, out there being the functional equivalent of IBM or Microsoft or anybody like that. And therefore, you're not subject to it. And corporations may not be either. That's a video for another day. But that said, they have to prove it, and they have to prove that the laws were enacted by a legislature that was fully in compliance with the Constitution and a governor in the same respect who either approved it or vetoed it, and the veto was overridden. They have to prove all of this. That's burden of proof. They don't want you to know that. That's what they have to prove, and that's what I attack. And we can beat them across the board. The governments in all these quote unquote states violate all 6 articles of the Constitution. Now, I don't know exactly how much Mr. Kerr knew about all of that, but instinctively, he was up to speed, and he had served some time in the Middle East. He didn't talk a lot about that, but he was clearly not happy about what he saw there, where he had some privileged contact with certain government officials that were running things over there, and he didn't like that there either, and liked it less when he got back, and he just said he couldn't take it anymore. Now, that's an extreme reaction. I get that. And I wish I would have met him before this. I could have filled him in here and say, hey, there are people out there, and I'm trying to create more of them like me that can go out and fix problems like this. And I still believe there are ways to do it after all this time and expense that I've taken, 15 years all in. I think it still can be done. The Constitution is still there. You just have to know what your rights are, which they don't bother to teach you in their mandatory public education system, and get in there with documents and set records. And even if you get convicted, in my case, by the way, all these years, and most of my stuff, to be sure, has been traffic court. I'm not in the habit of going out and committing common law crimes. But even if I did that, they don't have common law courts. So therefore, there's no jurisdiction to try anybody. And here's a little citation for you, one of the rare ones I have, not from the 90 parts of the U.S. Supreme Court, but it comes in the case where this murderer had been convicted in a Montana state court around the turn of the century, the 20th century. And his attorney went up to the Montana Supreme Court and said, not so fast. You don't have any jurisdiction. This murder occurred on a federal military reservation, and therefore the court was without jurisdiction. The Montana Supreme Court reversed the conviction. Shortly thereafter, the feds filed charges in the federal court, and I think the same attorney goes in there and said to the federal judge, not so fast. When Montana came into the Union, they did cede civil jurisdiction over this military reservation, but not criminal. The trial judge, in dismissing the case, where are these types of black robe bastards today, said, and I quote exactly here, it's unfortunate that a murderer should go unwhipped of justice, but more unfortunate that a court without jurisdiction should exercise it. Case is Tully v. United States, 140 Federal Reporter 899, page 903. That's what's supposed to be going on. You can't go beyond your jurisdictional bounds. Sometimes there's an injustice, and the judge that wrote this knew they couldn't try him in the Montana State Court because of double jeopardy. So if he did it, and I don't know, no one knows, but if he did it, he got away with it. Where's Johnny Cockroach and O.J. Simpson on this one? So that said, defined and limited powers, and we're not seeing anything like that today across the board. They just think they have all the power in my former hometown of Washington, D.C., and there isn't a damn thing you can do about it. And you go and vote and ask yourself this question: how can you make a knowledgeable, intelligent use of your right to vote when you try to instruct your representatives and ask questions about how the system is working and point out major constitutional errors they're making? And rarely do you ever get an acknowledgement of any correspondence, and they never act on it. And now with today's new normal, with all this COVID pandemic BS, you won't even get a chance to go in and talk to somebody in one of those government offices, even elected officials, quote unquote elected. They won't do it. They won't bother with you at all. The hell with you. You don't care. We're in power, and you do what it is we tell you to do. Exactly the opposite of the way the nation and republic was set up. This is principal and agent here. We tell them what to do. Since when did that change? And I never ask questions I can't answer, and I know the answer to that one. But that said, I'm sure Mr. Kerr had a lot of trouble, and maybe he knew rather a bit about this. I would love to know that. But and if he did, more power to him. But this is the truth that's out there, and what needs to happen is if law enforcement works together with us, that's one of the quickest ways to make changes that there is. If they refuse to enforce laws that they now know don't apply to us, that really puts a monkey wrench in the whole thing. And you can't touch them because they're obeying the Constitution. If they're going to try to fire them for attempting to invoke rights secured by the Constitution, good luck with that one. And any of you law enforcement types out there that need help about that, contact me, and I'll consider your case in terms of helping you out and dealing with the affirmative defenses here. I mean, it's got to stop. And with the incoming administration, that's a story for another day too. But Biden, one of the first people he appoints, Janet Yellen, former head of the Federal Reserve System, appoints her as Secretary of the Treasury. That's like putting the fox in the henhouse, for Christ's sake. That tells you what's going to happen with this administration. And those of you that can, I would advise you to unload most of your paper money and get hard assets. Those are the ones that go up. Paper money, who the hell knows? And I remember when I was growing up as a very young kid, Mom got me started collecting stamps and coins because she was a single mom and I was a very active kid. And to this day, I still do these things. And you notice things and you don't get it at that age. But like in Germany in the 1920s, for example, the exchange rate in 1922 for one American silver dollar, which they were still minting in those days, with German marks, was about 300 to 1. Okay, 1922. By the fall of 1923, you ready for this? The exchange rate was 2 billion to 1. It got so bad in Germany, you literally needed a wheelbarrow full of currency to buy a loaf of bread. And that all happened in large part because of the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I. And that's a story for another video. But trust me, that was the people behind the scenes, the Vatican types, the New York banksters, the international types set all this up. And they knew what was coming. And they also knew, probably not from day one, that they were going to put Hitler in power, but they were going to have someone like that that would be in power and led to the events of World War II. This is how these bastards work, and it's what we have to stop. And I think we're in the only nation ever conceived where we have a chance to do that. And that's why I've been 15 years all in. I'm now in my 72nd year. Life is ahead of me, and I'm still going ahead here full speed. So, outcome unknown right now, but I have some astounding documents that you can get with my constitutional defense document packet. Send me an email, uwinnincourt@gmail.com, and I'll fire back and tell you all about that. And you go in and start filing documents like this, if we can get them filed these days. And earlier, it wasn't too bad. You could actually go into the clerk of court, and they would file them. Nowadays, with all the damn courts closed, you have to mail them in, and that's a video for another day. But sometimes, they return them to you without anything but a one-page letter that says you didn't follow their forms and all this bullshit. And sometimes they don't respond at all. And other times, it gets really even more interesting. Because nowadays they simply can't afford to have this kind of record set even in a traffic court, because if that goes up for review, that's reversible error, as corrupt as their system is. And Article 6, Section 13 of the Constitution here, allegedly currently in effect in California, basically orders all the appellate judges to find everything to be harmless error. You went there, you had a fair trial, see you later. And this is especially true if you were represented by a state bar association attorney. Then there's no way to recover from that at the present time. That's another area I'm working on, by the way. So you have to learn when you get my documents, study them. And they're not that hard. And just the 5 basic documents you start out with, so you get up to speed on the issues. Because you're going to go in there and tell them that California, in my case, is not a state admitted into this union. You better damn well have some backing for it. And wouldn't you know, I happen to have an 84-page unopposed brief on that issue alone. And that's the crown jewel of all the unopposed issues that I put in there. No states. That undoes everything. It absolutely does. And that was the intent, by the way, of the non-existent 14th War Amendment, was to do that. But they didn't bother to tell anybody who ratified the amendment that that's what was going on. And also, they wanted to make citizens out of corporations. I mean, nobody knew that. So that 14th Amendment doesn't exist. I've got about a 40-page brief on that issue as well. And you talk to them about racial representation, for example, quorum to do business, qualifications of members of the House of Representatives. And right now, out of 438, you got 0 qualified. Are you listening, Nancy Pelosi? 0. You got 0 in the Senate, too, because that's not an elected body. Never has been. And the 17th Amendment supposedly changed that. It didn't and couldn't have, because we had no states in existence at the time that could ratify or deny an amendment in 1913. Didn't exist. And if they did, the official count was 46 in favor, at least 1 opposed, which was Utah, and Delaware was in the mix. So you had 2 states that withheld their approval. And Article 5 says that no state shall, without its consent, be denied its equal representation in the Senate. This would have had to been 48-0. And in effect, it was 0-48, just like they say in Langley and the CIA, black is white. Bitch. So that amendment doesn't exist either. So you got 0 in the House, 0 in the Senate. Who the hell is there to pass laws? And this situation, in my view, my studied view, goes back as far as the 38th and 39th Congresses in the 1860s. Same situation, and you had racial representation. That's a video for another day, too. But you get into all this stuff, it's life-changing. I wish they would have taught me 50 years ago when I was in 9th grade civics and 10th grade U.S. history. I didn't hear a bit of this. None. Mandatory public education system. If I had done that, my life would have been different long ago. And who knows, maybe the country would be now, because I would have been out there at an early age, getting out there and educating a lot more people and making changes quicker than it's possible to do right now. But I still think they're possible. So law enforcement, you people out there, think about it. And by the way, when I was growing up, we called them peace officers. When and how did this change? Law enforcement. You just think you can go out there and get away with murder and shoot people and put your foot on their necks and this, that, and the other, and nothing's going to happen to you. Well, that's going to change, and I hope in a hurry. And it isn't a black and white issue. And in fact, my word to the black civil rights types is to get over it. Get the hell away from civil rights. None of you got anything from the 4th Amendment, and you were never intended to. Yeah, they made us all equal, not by raising you to our level as state citizens, which they couldn't have done in the manner they attempted to do it, but by reducing us to yours as stateless entities. And what happened there was the sovereign body politic went from principal and agent to what they would recognize as guardian and ward, to what we recognize on the street more readily as a master and slave. In a situation where we're stateless entities, that's another major issue that I argue that they don't know, and this is what scares them to death. Because, and this is why everybody, by the way, the back row bastards get angry with you in court, and the local dumbass. The reason for it is that you're putting in issues that they're not only not familiar with, but they understand instinctively that if we're right, there's some serious leverage we're going to have against them for committing acts of treason to the Constitution. That's how bad it is, and that's why they want you to think that we know the law and you don't. We went to law school and all this crap, and none of them do. Trust me, I've got so much experience over the course of 5 decades, there's no question about it. That either they don't know, or the only ones that get help are the O.J. Simpsons and the Lori Loughlin's types of the world that can afford to pay them off behind the scenes and pay off the black robe bastards to go easy on them. You know, in the Lori Loughlin's case, get a couple of months confinement in club bed, when maybe she should have been up here, you know, in San Quentin or what have you. But that said, the ones that do know are not going to tell you and me. We won't even see people like that. You're going to get a public pretender. You're not going to know a damn thing. So these are things all you'll learn by getting my documents. Send me an email, youwinningcourt@gmail.com. And you'll find out the full story here, things that you just can't imagine. And what you can do then is learn yourself, teach your children, and let them teach their children, your posterity, and they can get out from under a lot quicker than anybody else can by raising these types of issues in the trial court. I mean, I've seen it. I mean, in South Carolina, I was there, got yanked across the country, was in there 7 months in jail as a political prisoner. And the first hearing I had there in Columbia, South Carolina, I shut him up 30 seconds flat, stunned him into silence. And the entire time I'm there, the local dumbass didn't say 2 words to me, didn't know what to do. And they're right. What I think happened there was I was there so long because the feds were investigating me at the time behind the scenes as a domestic terrorist, but they weren't able to prove it because that's not who I am. So it's an interesting story. I'll tell you more in another video about that South Carolina scenario, but 30 seconds. And yet when I went to get the video of this hearing, they claimed not to have made one. And this is in a court of record. What does that tell you? I mean, just stunned and astonished. You've never seen anything like that. And that's $1 million video because there I am. I'm the one, bound and gagged. I'm shackled hand and foot in a red jail suit. And they're the ones in trouble with the law, and everybody in that courtroom knew it. That's priceless. That's what the framers of the Constitution did for us with the original intent, was to create all these situations where we would have the power and could take care of business and order our agents what to do. I want it back. It wasn't perfect, but you should too, whether you're African, Asian, or whatever. And I'm doing a follow-up video on that, so you'll see you're much better off in the system that we had than the one we have now. We're all slaves. It can't be any simpler than that. They think they own everybody. So that said, I'm going to follow up here. Send me for information on my document packet. Send me an email, youwinningcourt@gmail.com. Remember to like the documents, subscribe, tell your friends, get the word out. The quicker we act, the quicker we end this crap and get our government back. Thank you.